you. So I actually have a little intro that was impromptu and planned this morning. So while people are coming in from grabbing a sandwich, I would like to do a song. And I'd like to see how quick-witted some of you are, because I caught on to this song after only one verse was sang to me, all right? So if you can, join along, all right? This is to show your wits, so don't be shy. All right, so I'd like to introduce Sam, beautiful, wonderful Sam that I met this morning, and she was the one who taught me this. So let's get started. You can kind of try to speak into it. Okay. So there are movements too, not required for the quick-wittedness, but it would be like bonus points, right? So, all right, this was this morning at like 7:30. All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, let's do it. I'm alive, awake, alert, enthusiastic. I'm alive, awake, alert, enthusiastic. I'm alive, awake, alert. I'm alert, awake, alive. I'm alive, awake, alert, enthusiastic. All right, anybody? I want you to do it with us. We're going to do it one more time, but we're going to have arms this time. It's going to get really intense, okay? You ready? What? Oh, okay, yeah, everyone stand up. Quick, guys. We're going to be alive, awake, alert, and enthusiastic.
It's like noon right now. So
it is noon, so you really have no. All right, guys, can you keep up? Can you keep up? All right, so I'm alive, awake, alert, enthusiastic. I'm alive, awake, alert, enthusiastic. I'm alive, awake, alert. I'm alert, awake, alive. I'm alive, awake, alert, enthusiastic. Woo! Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Yes, so the people the poor people at our breakfast table were like, why is this happening? All right, so yes, my name is ALYSSA NICOLL, and as the kind Jeff introduced me, I am a Google developer expert, and I love Angular, and I have lots of other hobbies. And recently, among those hobbies and talents, I discovered that I can draw. I'm kind of an artiste in the making. So I have, thank you, yes. So prepare yourselves, because all of these slides were handcrafted with my artiste skills. So yes, thank you. All right, so at ALYSSA NICOLL, 'tis my Twitter handle. Please tweet me. I have open DM always, so reach out to me if you ever have questions for code or just want to chat. Today, we're going to talk about the day I met Steve. So I've been in the industry for about 5 years. Not all of that was developing full-time. But I've been in the industry for about 5 years, and you might call it blessed, or being super naive. But up until this past year, I had this idea that all developers care. Like, they actually care. Whether it's about the code they're writing on the day-to-day, whether it's about the client, the user, the customer that they're trying to help, I really did believe, until the day I met Steve, that they all cared. So I was on the way to movies to see a movie. Don't remember which one. I go to a ton. And I was going to meet my friend. And you know how work is. He's a developer too. And he was running late. And he's like, oh yeah, just like 5 more minutes. I got to get this PR written, right? So I'm like, yeah. So I come into his work. I'm sitting in his office hanging out while he's working. And Steve is, an employee in his office. And Steve's sitting over there chugging away. And Sally comes in and is like, hey, Steve, I have a request from you. Can we please use special characters? And I'm like my ears perk up, because I'm like, what? I've been a developer for 4 years now, and I'm like, special characters? She's like, that input field that we use every single day? I'd really like to use special characters in the input field. Steve goes, but you're not allowed to use special characters in that input field. And I'm like, at this point, what? Actually physically turning to look at these people in this bizarre conversation. And she's like, no, please, just inches, periods, quotes, things like this. He's like, no, but you're not allowed to use special characters in that input field. And I'm like, what the fudge? Who says that? Who makes these rules? He goes, just type out inches. Just type out inches. And she's like, but if I could just use the special characters, it would make my life and everyone's life here so much easier. And here's a quote that I don't think I will forget for as long as I'm a developer. I don't make the rules, I just write the code. At this point, my friend knows that I'm like gawking at this conversation. And he kind of like peers over his laptop at me and he's like, close your mouth, stop staring, right? Because like, I'm like, well, I don't make the rules. In my mind, we're developers. We can do anything, we can be anything, we can write anything. Even if that means giving Sally special characters in her input field. So, yeah, this is definitely my face, right? Like behind the conversation, as you zoom in, I'm just like, wah! So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about, like my Steve, he's over there typing. He's studiously working, not making special characters happen. So, characteristics of Steve. And I'd like to identify these, not just so that we can point and laugh and say, ha, you're a Steve, but so that we can maybe identify these in ourselves, right? So, old. What do I mean by old? I definitely don't mean age. I don't mean time that you've been on this blessed earth. I mean old mentally, like up here. And if you think about older people in like a mental situation, for instance, I'm kind of an older mental person at times. I can be like, I don't want it that way. I want it the way that I always have had it, right? You're set in your ways, you're kind of stubborn. But when we think about that, there's also a lot of other things that come up when you think of characteristics of Steve. So I want to ask you right now, while you're looking at these characteristics, have any of you ever met, and you don't have to say like, it's me, I'm Steve, like don't say that please, but have any of you ever met or come across a Steve in this industry? Okay, 1, 2, oh, more people, yay. I was like, oh no, I'm the only one. We're grumpy, difficult, ill-tempered, just difficult to work with, right? I love this one, jaded, right? Where you're like looking at the code or you're looking at the feature, you're looking at the input field that none of your coworkers can use special characters in, and you're like, this seems fine, right? How does this happen, you all? How do we get to this point? Furthermore, why does it happen? These are all questions that as soon as I left that conversation, I started asking myself. And I've studied up and watched some other TED Talks and things like that and really like dug down into this issue. And things like not enough resources come up, right, to get your job done, whether it's time, money, other people to lean on and help you. Your boss or others take credit for your work. That's a big one that gets mentioned a lot. And lack of autonomy. So obviously, none of us, at least unless we own our own company, and then you can be like, I do what I want, right? None of us can do exactly what we want to do the way that we want to do it. We have to answer to someone at the end of the day. But when I say the lack of autonomy, or the lack of control, it's to the point where you don't have any ownership or say-so in any of the features you write, in any way that you write it, right? Like you literally are helpless. You just are like typing it out, getting it done. So there's many, many more, but out of all of these, none of them are like a deal breaker, right? None of them are, in my mind at least, something that would push someone over the edge to a place of just not caring, just apathy, right? So I'm still asking this question at this point during my research and asking friends, like, okay, well, how do we get from this to Steve? Because I don't want to be Steve. I so desperately do not want to be Steve. So how does it happen so that I can avoid that? Something that I learned recently is that these small things, these frustrations, if given enough time, they can turn to anger. Now, you don't have to show hands, but I would absolutely love it. Have any of you ever worked, not necessarily in this field, but in any field, and gotten to a point where these tiny frustrations maybe lead to anger? Anybody? Yeah? You got a couple? Oh, lots of hands. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, me too. I've been there. I've been angry. Well, did you know that if you give it enough time, in the right circumstances, anger can turn to apathy? Now, anybody know what apathy is? That one was like, it's like a word that lots of people use, but does anybody have like a really good definition for apathy? Just don't care, yeah. This is my abstract apathy girl. I was like redrawing her last night, and I was like, do you like this one? She's kind of like abstract and blocky. My husband was like, Yes, ship it. It's perfect. So she's my abstract apathy girl. But given enough time, apathy, it gets to turn into full-blown, ugly, nasty burnout, right? So there's a doctor. Her name is Dr. Geri Pulio. I probably said that wrong, but Dr. Geri Pulio. And she did a study on burnout and burnout patients, and she actually had a ton of participants. And I love this quote from her of, burnout workers feel like a cog in a machine. You're not human anymore, and nobody cares, right? And that's the part that gets me. I can understand the part where you're a cog in a machine, you're churning out code. At the end of the day, you just don't feel human anymore. You don't have autonomy, you don't get to make decisions, you don't have pride in your work. But that part gets me so much. Nobody cares. So in her study, something really shocking, because I actually have a degree in psychology, and right before I jumped into this industry, I was going for clinical studies, and so I have kind of a psych background, and so when I was studying this, I was really interested that there was actually, it's not just a mental, like, roadblock. There are actual physical things that happen to your body when you're going through burnout, which is quite astonishing to me. So not just fatigue, but sheer exhaustion, where you just are like, you know, and I can see that. It's starting to paint a picture that makes sense to me. If you're just literally at the brink of exhaustion and collapse, of course you don't care if Sally has special characters, right? You have nothing more to give. Irritability, you know, grumpy. The inability to concentrate, complete tasks. And this last one, chronic acute disease. I think this was the most shocking of all. So in her study, she had, I don't even know how many burnout patients she was studying and working with and consulting with, but she said that 10% of burnout patients, after leaving the organization, right, after getting out of that toxic environment, developed cancer. 10%. I was like, wait, what? Right? Like, the effects on the body for burnout are immeasurable, and we still don't know. This isn't a direct correlation. You can't say, oh, you have burnout, you're probably going to get cancer. Like, there's no way to say that with most psych studies. But it is a collection of data that we can look back on and reflect on and say, maybe being burned out your entire career isn't the best choice for your physical well-being. Right? Like, we can say that assuredly. So I told you about the day I met Steve, but I want to tell you about the night I met Becca. And this one actually made, I think the first time I told it, I started tearing up. I was like, no crying, snap out of it. But I met Becca, and it was at a meetup, and we went to get drinks afterwards, and she started telling me her story. And I think the most alarming thing, because, you know, I've said it before to friends or family or whatever, like, yeah, I'm just so numb, you know, but like, she said it with such an assured sense, like there was no emotion on her face. There was nothing there. She was actually numb, right? So when she was saying these depressing things to me and telling me her story as a developer, it was just the facial expressions, or I guess the lack thereof, was the most startling thing for me. And she said, I just can't care anymore. I'm told in my job what to write, exactly how to write it, and if I kind of, you know, want to be creative about it, I want to solve it in a different way, if I want to use something different maybe this time, then my pull request is rejected and I'm told to go back and do it again. I am literally a glorified typewriter. Again, try to imagine this coming from a girl who had no emotions on her face or in her voice. There was nothing there. It really struck me as I was listening to her story, how related and yet how different Becca was from Steve. And how, if we're all really honest, Becca is on the way to being a Steve, right? So these things for me personally, they hit me hard. Because going from psychology into this industry, it was really exciting because I got to solve things, right? I feel like a developer, like, what is it called, where you're like, you've got the spyglass, the Sherlock Holmes thing, but I feel like that in development, where I'm like, all right, where's that bug, right? So for me, when I first started meeting this last year, these kind of people in the industry, I was just like, wait, what? Like, you're not excited about this? You're not, you're not passionate about this? And it got to a point with Steve especially, that he was actively harming the people that he had set out to help by becoming a developer in the first place. And so besides the fact that we have some evidence that points to, hey, it's not the best for your physical well-being to be burned out throughout your career, right? We know that now. It's not the best for you mentally, obviously. If you're irritable all the time, I'm gonna think it's not the best for your friends around you, right? So we've got this like negative environment. But you go even further outside of that bubble, and you look at the people who we are here, like it's almost like our, our doctor's oath, our developer's oath, right? That we're sworn to help and protect them. And they're harming them. So what can we do, right? I think we're all in agreement here that this isn't optimal, right? Like burnout is not the best way to live your career life. So personally, and again, been in this industry for 4 to 5 years, so I'm just gonna tell you what I know and what I've found. And I'd love afterwards if we could have a conversation and I could glean more from you all, because I know our collective knowledge is significantly more than I have so far. But what I have to offer you standing here today is scuba diving. Is to not have all of your eggs in one basket, right? So as human beings, as people, we have interests. And as ALYSSA, I have found it's really difficult to not pour my entire self into one thing. I don't know what it is about my personality, and I've met other developers like me, so maybe it's like as developers, we have this trait, but we get so into something, right? Whether it's Angular or whether it's just this feature we're working on, this project, that literally our entire life, it seems like, for the next 48 hours, for the next week, for the next month, for the next year, goes into that one thing. And what happens when that one thing goes downhill? What happens when that pull request isn't accepted? What happens when you do everything right and nobody cares? Well, where's your self-esteem? Where is your sense of self? Where is ALYSSA at that point? Well, I'm not in a great place. So one of the things I can offer to you is to have other interests that you yourself, for me it's scuba diving, but you yourself can be as passionate about as I hope you are for development. Something else, anything else. One of my good friends, such an inspiration to me, she actually taught me Angular. She loves to knit, right? Like knitting, right? Like it doesn't have to be expensive, it doesn't have to be time consuming, but you have to have something else that you can get passionate about, that you can maybe even enter in a different community, just so that not all of your self-esteem is wrapped up in one thing. And the last note that I want to leave you with is, do you remember how you got here? Not today in Salt Lake City. Took a train, by the way, from the airport. But do you remember how you got here into development? I do. I was in a career that I felt hopeless in, and I was following the motions. And I had my husband and my friends who were all developers, and they started teaching me. I said, what are you doing? Oh, I'm writing Rails. What's Rails? What are you doing? Oh yeah, I just built this database and making API calls. And I'm like, okay, well none of those words just made sense. You want to slow your roll, right? And I'd make them teach me. And that's how I got in this industry. That's how I got here. Because I'm a curious, insane monkey that wants to take things apart, right? So think back, how did you get here? What passion once burned in you? I mentioned it earlier, but to give you a reference, my passion was being a code detective. Being able to go through things, and I still get this way. I get a bug and I'm like, ooh, what's causing it? Where's it coming from? And I know it's weird, and my coworkers have gotten used to it, I hope. But I'm like, ooh, let's do it, right? And that's how I attack development. That's how I attack my day. But ask yourself, what is your most meaningful reason for being a developer, right? If you can center yourself with that most meaningful reason, if you can go back to that, it's going to give you more than just the ability to solve problems and push out code. It's going to give you a center that in this conscious, continually changing industry, that we have things thrown at us, that we have disappointments, that we have, just maybe jaded coworkers that we have to deal with. It's going to give you something to come back to and focus on and kind of redirect that energy, right? You don't have to be crushed by the world around you. So that is my talk today. Thank you so much for being here.